Public Transport Subcommittee. And Phil, would you like to do the opening karakia, please?
Morena tātou. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mā kina ki uta, kia mā tara ki tai, e hi aki ana a te atakura, he tio, he huka, he hauhu, tihe, mauri ora.
We'll take the health and safety statement as read. And I'd just like to introduce Jordan, who is on my right, who will be taking the minutes for today's meeting. We move to apologies. We've got Angus for lateness, and we've got Deputy Mayor Angela and Shannon Jones for absence. There's no other apologies, so I'm happy to move those. If I can have a seconder for that. Thanks, Angela. I'll put that. All those in favour, against, carried. And online, in terms of members, we have Chair Pamela, and also we've got Andy Baker online. So just wanted to confirm that. In terms of confirmation of the agenda, there are no changes to that. Need to resolve that. So I'm happy to move confirmation of the agenda, seconded by Mayor Adrian. I'll put that. All those in favour, against, carried. Are there any disclosures of interest in terms of matters on today's agenda? There are not. Okay, so we'll now move to item 5, the public forum, and we've got Lindsay Horn. Okay, it's been a change. Okay, Georgie, welcome. And the PowerPoint presentation is contained within the agenda. So members have also had the opportunity to look at the presentation, but Georgie, if you can go ahead and present about 5 minutes or thereabouts, and then there may be some questions from members once you have completed your presentation. So welcome.
Thank you. Kia ora koutou, ko Georgie Danzia ho, he onoho ana o ki Kirikiriroa. My name's Georgie and I'm a Hamilton local, and I have 2 of my colleagues from the Future of Rail online, Lindsay and Darren, who have come to support me with all the technical stuff that I don't know about. So we're here today to speak to you about HUIA. We, as many of you will know, because you came to our public meeting, we've run a really successful grassroots campaign on Te Huia, which meant we got an extension of funding. It was a real people powered campaign that brought together a huge range of diverse groups. And one of the main things that we want to say today is just a huge thank you to Waikato Regional Council and Hamilton City Council for the mahi you have done in this space, and for us to be able to continue to fund Te Huia. So thank you so much for that, and that's a huge part of why we're here today. But as we all know, the mahi doesn't stop here. There's a lot of work to do regarding Te Huia and rail across Aotearoa. And so what I've come to you today for is 6 asks for the next steps for you to consider in your decision-making process. The first one is an integrated public transport system. So although we know that the bus connectors at Rotakoti stations are quite good and effective, we see that there's a bit of a lack of those connecting buses at Frankton. Sometimes we've got buses parked up there for the day, as you can see from the slides, but not necessarily transporting people to and from the train station as they need. So our ask is that those are considered so that our people with disabilities, our people catching early morning trains in the dark can have full access to the train station. Next slide, please. We do want to say thank you very much for that beautiful bike stand in the background of the picture on the screen now. I think that's a really great step in the right direction as far as integrating our transport. So thank you very much for that. Our next ask, if we could have the next slide please, is increased services. So my kids often, well, a few times have gone with their grandparents to Kelly Tarleton's for the day on a Saturday. And it's been bloody great for everyone involved, including me. And because of that Saturday service, it's made a real difference. We see that from the patronage numbers. We'd like you to consider continuing to increase those services offered, particularly having some on a Sunday and more services on a Saturday. We'll look at, I know that faster travels times is something that we're all interested in. I encourage you to keep looking at that. And also marketing and advertising of the service. I think we can really increase patronage if we have an effective marketing campaign. Slide, please. Thank you. Our next one is around increasing the amount of stops that we have. So Pukekohe Station, as you know, Auckland Transport are due to start a train from there in 2025, but we'd like to encourage you to consider having Te HUIA stop in that sort of growing area between now and 2025 and beyond, just to increase that patronage and connect us to Pukekohe and to Auckland, and work with Auckland on those. The other stops, other growing areas, Te Kaupata, Pokeno and Tuakau, we'd like you to consider having stops in those areas as well. Thank you. Next slide, please. Our fifth ask is around the rolling stock bid. So you may be aware, I'm sure you're aware, that the Lower North Island has put in a stock for a bid for more rolling stock. We know with economies of scale, it's very useful for us if we can increase that rolling stock bid as much as we can. We encourage you to work with the Lower North Island, excuse me, in putting in a bid for more rolling stock so that we can expand our train and our trains in the Waikato and beyond. Next one, please. Oh, yeah, sorry, this is, yes, cool. So when I was 16, I took the overnight train from Hamilton to Wellington to see my sister who was 18 in Wellington with my friend. And I'd love to do that again as a 37-year-old. And so what we'd really like you to consider is that central connector service from here to Palmerston North, working with Horizons and the Lower North Island to make sure that happens. We know that it's a track that is easily accessible, and we'd like you to consider that connected, because I think it would be used very well. Next one, please. So here's a summary of all our asks. I said 6, but there's actually 5, because our Pukekohe our Pukekohe stop has been integrated in. But yeah, that's basically what I have for you today, with a summary of our 5 asks. If you just go to the next slide. All of these things I know you will be very well aware of, the value in investing in public transport and in trains. Trains are the future of public transport, and I really encourage you to continue to prioritise this very, very important mahi. Happy to take any questions. Thank you again very, very much.
Okay, thanks, Georgia. Open for questions from members. Angela.
Yeah, thank you, Georgie, and Lindsay and Darren, for your work on this presentation to our public forum. Yeah, it's always fantastic to hear from a broad range of people around their support for rail and interregional passenger rail. You have made some really good points through your public forum submission. So thank you for that. I just had a question around if we couldn't do all 5. Now, I know that, not sure if you're aware, but a number of these are in our LTP and in our agenda pack today. So, yeah, well done.
Yeah.
If we couldn't do all of them, which, what would be sort of your top 3?
Thank you. I'm going to pass it over to Lindsay to answer that. If Lindsay can be unmuted.
Kia ora, yeah, I'm just online. Darren, feel free to chime in with this. It's really hard for us to pick them because we think that they're all really important. But I think when we're looking at that original business case and like the increased services, I think that's going to be really important to get to the increased services as outlined, because it's what was set in place for those patronage numbers. But at the same time, the additional stops I think are also going to be really important as well. So for us, the connecting to the central North Island would be like a real bonus. But I think if you're looking at patronage and really having this service embedded, it would be the investment in the extra station stops and then really increasing the number of services as well. But then it's kind of like, if you're going to do that, then you may as well also feed it with your buses as well. So yeah, I think number 5 is our kind of extra bonus one with the central connector, but at the same time, we do see a lot of value in that Pukekohe stop. So that's kind of what I would say. Darren, did you want to add anything to that one?
Yeah, sort of a couple of quick thoughts on that. Money's too tight to mention with sort of, the current government policy statement and the sort of pressure to increase the fare box recovery of Te HUIA. So, number 1, I think, would be a quick win that would make real benefit, where you've got sort of existing sort of buses around to connect Hamilton Frankton to the city centre, and that would be a good similar ask for Auckland to do the same from Auckland Strand into Auckland city centre. Of the other ones, I think getting a Sunday service in would be, and a Sunday and public holiday service, which would mean that effectively the service would be operating every day of the year, would be probably the next one on the list. And I think if you're talking about new stations, are there cheaper and lower cost options to do them as temporary stations to start off with? And for those of you who don't know, I'm sort of currently living in Brisbane, and on our north coastline between Landsborough and Nambour, we put in a number of those stations in 2006, 2007, and they're still there in 2024, and they do the job perfectly well. But they were a very cheap investment in temporary but fit for purpose stations. So that's my top 3.
Have you got a supplementary? Okay, Eugene.
Yep, thank you, Chair. Thanks, Georgie, Lindsay and Darren. Great presentation. I probably could just, I don't have a question, it's just more of a comment or an update. So prioritise investment in the north is something obviously Waikato District's got to pick up and take. And probably a good thing has probably just come to us just recently is possibly some low cost options around platforms, and there's quite a bit of work to do in that to see how feasible that is. But I think that the committee and the wider group is looking very hard at options, because we do see the benefit in picking up one of those northern areas. But also you mentioned connection with bus services. So Waikato District is, if we can stop at Pukekohe, it's making sure our bus services align to that to pick up the Pokeno and Tuakau residents that want to use that service, because that could be something that could work really well to get people bums on seats in the interim. And but yes, we are working really hard on our next part of that would be for investment in those northern stations is then going to do a detailed business case. This year, Waikato District done an enhanced annual plan, so we've got an LTP next year, and we just need to push hard, and we really appreciate your support for when we go in that process to get funding for that DBC, which is the next stage, and that will probably incorporate some of those low-cost options around platforms. Thanks for your presentation.
Sarah, did you have a?
Just probably been covered by conversations already, but I'm outside of this. But I am just interested in understanding what do those temporary lower cost platforms look like, and what kind of thinking has been done around the feasibility of them for those Wakara district stations.
Eugene.
Probably it's pretty new sort of a concept or options that have come to us recently, and the options look really good and look feasible and make a lot of sense, but there's quite a bit of process that we have to work through to see if they fit safety and etc. So, and also the other thing is we're all struggling with affordability at the moment, so getting that into it in a platform, even a platform type of thing, a low cost option is still costs quite considerable money, and so we definitely need co-investment from our good partners here, stuff like that. So yeah.
Thing then that like this committee or other councils can do to as that conversation progresses to support you guys looking at that?
Yeah, I think there is, and there's probably a bit as that comes up into in the reports today that we could probably ask for some support on.
Angela. Okay, nothing. Any further questions or comments in terms of the presentation? Don't appear to be any. So, Georgie, thank you. And a number of the matters that you have raised will come up, as has already been mentioned, in reports today. Also, in particular, in terms of the Te HUIA review report, and part of that's also the Te HUIA improvement plan. So, so there'll be some further discussion on these matters later on in today's meeting. But really appreciate. Thanks for the support and also the passion that you actually bring as part of that report.
Awesome. Thanks very much. I have a final comment, which is, can I please take a photo for our social media? I can just be a selfie. Is that all good? Okay. Thank you. We've got to think about our marketing as well.
Yeah.
Is that all right?
Yeah. And also to thank Lindsay and Darren for coming online in terms of presenting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Georgie. Okay, and as I said, we'll come back to a number of those matters later on in the meeting. So we will now move to confirmation and receipt of minutes. So on page 21, there's a brief covering report to receive the minutes of our last meeting, and in terms of the 3rd of May, and also to receive the minutes of the Regional Transport Committee, and there is also receiving a decision extract from the Regional Transport Committee. So if I can have is that okay? Thank you. So Sarah and Maxine moved and seconded. Any discussion on those? There's nothing. I'll put that. All those in favour? Against? Carried. So now we'll move to item 7.1, and that's the Director's Report, and that is commencing on page 38. Phil. Welcome, Nigel.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, Committee. Thank you for inviting me along this morning. As you can see here, we've got our director's report, summary update on some of the key work streams that have been arising in the public transport space recently. There are 4 key areas probably to note in here. I won't repeat everything in the report verbatim, but there are just a couple of updates that I might just like to add on top of what we've got there. Against an update against the Regional Land Transport Plan approval, as was just included in the minutes that were just confirmed just now. The Regional Transport Committee and the Regional Council have adopted and approved the plan. I can confirm that was lodged with the agency on Monday. So that part of the process is now complete, and that will go into the development of the National Land Transport Program from here, and we will update committee on the outcomes of that process as we know more, which will be sometime after September. As has been noted here, there are a number of work streams that contribute to the bus contract renewal program update, including the development of the zero emission bus roadmap and the technical implementation plan and a procurement strategy. A meeting of the steering group was just held on Tuesday to confirm work is being completed in this space. So we do have an independent project program manager for that, and work is underway. Also of note, just with regards to zero emission bus vehicles, with the recent release of the draft second emissions reduction plan, there has been no change to the requirements for zero emission buses to be introduced from the fleet from 1 July 2025, with the expectation that by mid-2035, all of the New Zealand PT fleet is zero electric buses. So that has come through despite a change in government, so there's been no change to that requirement, so we'll continue to operate on that basis. And final point of note is just with the regional rating for public transport, members will be familiar with the work that was undertaken to include that in long-term plans ahead of going out for consultation earlier this year. So the work that has come back has recommended that additional options are developed. So the process from here will be engagement. Waikato Regional Council will engage with all of our member partners to develop a co-designed suite of options that can be included for the consultation in the annual plan for 25-26. So the first workshop for that is not next week, the week after, on the 13th of August, we'll be engaging with Waikato Regional Council members, and then beyond that with elected members throughout the region. So, and then obviously the last part of that is just an update on some of the actions that have arisen from previous meetings, including some reports that are being brought to the committee today. And so through the chair, I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you, Nigel. I open it up for questions or any comments from members. Sarah, you look poised there.
Yes. Thank you. Thanks so much, Nigel, for the report. I'm interested in the zero emissions bus fleet update. I guess are we on track in terms, or is Regional Council on track in terms of, sorry, first question is there policy that's clear that Regional Council will be owning the depot charging?
What I might do is just defer to the director on this one, but at this stage the answer is no, but I'll let Phil potentially clarify on that one.
So the changed operating environment, the sustainable public transport framework that was being rolled out by the previous government, provided an option for regional councils to decide to move into that space if they chose to. So it was never a mandatory obligation. The new government at this stage has said it is reviewing that framework, but hasn't announced what those changes might be yet.
So, because my question is around the depot, the land, and the charging infrastructure rather than the services itself. And from previous conversations we'd had through this committee, particularly last term, there was a strong emphasis and advice from staff that regional council should own the actual land and depots so that there's, to put it in the best, negotiating position when looking at bus contract services. Otherwise, we could end up with poor outcomes with a monopoly basically over that charging infrastructure and land. So I'm just wanting to clarify, is that still the position of staff and the council, and have elected members, provided guidance in any documents to confirm that's the direction of travel? It's still in there?
So the regional PT plan makes several statements on that.
Yeah.
There was some technical work done back 4 years ago and a couple of years ago looking at aspects of that. What is in the tables here and mentioned in the report is that we're pulling that together and now moving that as part of our wider contract renewal process into a program of work that is underway and will complete over the next 6, 12, 18 months as we move into procurement. Along that journey, we'll come back to this committee and back to council multiple times with aspects of that discussion. So there was an action identified at a previous meeting for us to present that today, and that's not possible. So with that is underway at the moment, and we'll come back to a future meeting.
Okay. Thank you, Phil. I guess I'm still not fully clear though. Is the clear direction that regional council owns the depot, or am I hearing from you that now there's kind of we're working through options?
So the aspiration of getting best value for money has definitely not changed. The market that we operate in as a region is shallow in that there are a small number of operators, and the discussion of the role of a regional council or partner investment in something that then opens up that market is very much a live discussion and is a central core of that procurement exercise. Now, whether a full ownership model or a lease model or who owns what, how we operate around the charging system and the access to the electricity network are all aspects of that which will go on their own investigation, and that's underway at the moment.
Okay.
I mean, the other thing I would add is that in the meantime, as a region, we have delivered 2 charging depots in Cambridge and Te Awamutu almost uniquely for the whole country.
Yeah.
In most other locations, those depots are being built by operators. So but as a region, we have more experience in building depots than almost anybody else.
Yeah.
So we've certainly been at the leading edge of this discussion, even if we haven't got our region-wide framework for our next contract round fully resolved at this point.
Okay. And I mean, in terms of timing for getting the original plan was what, 2027 that we renewed the contract, but we're looking at extending that slightly to allow for more time. Is that?
So we have units across the region that expire at different times, but the larger units and a lot of units expire in 2026 and 2027, as you say. There is likely to be a need for us to extend some of those, but exactly what they are and for how long is part of that process we're underway with at the moment. So I can't give you detail specifically on which would be extended by how long. And it would all be subject to the agency's approval.
Okay. And given the lack of, I guess, charging infrastructure at the moment, is there any prospect of there being electric or buses on the Hamilton network, the metro network, within the next few years, or are we essentially going to need to wait for that depot to be built?
That's a negotiation that we'd have with the operators each time there's a change made to the network. And it's possible that we could see vehicles introduced as part of a change to the network. Right. A substantive change will come with a contract renewal.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I have some other questions, but I'll. My people
doing a
get
great
tired
job,
of me,
Phil.
tell me. Too late, maybe don't. I have some questions on personal safety at the transport centre and on the buses. It's a national issue. We've seen in the news various incidences, including quite tragic ones, and more recently the news of a young girl in Hamilton, I think it was, taking the buses and experiencing, some really disgusting behaviour from another passenger. So what conversations could we start up around just looking for further solutions for personal safety? There's SIPTEDs being applied with the refresh of the public transport centre as much as possible, but I guess I'm wondering what can we do to explore other options around the presence of Māori wardens, greater presence of police? Could we use peppercorn rent to encourage other presence around at the transport centre, greater presence of safety officers, just options to improve that?
We're really grateful to the great work that City Safe does at the Transport Centre, and the investment that Hamilton City Council is putting into the Transport Centre will continue to make a positive difference to safety there. We're working with City Safe to see if they are able to extend their hours to now be on site for all of the time that buses are running,
right,
because we've extended timetables that have not been met by that at this point. So that's a conversation that's underway. We're also very aware of these issues nationally, and every issue locally is reported to us, and we work with our operator on a case-by-case basis. In the wider context, we are taking forward several changes that improve the safety of drivers, and we make good use of the CCTV systems that are on every bus to investigate fully when an incident occurs. Within the next batch of minor route changes, which will perhaps occur, I think, around the end of September, there will be a number of very minor adjustments that just mean that buses don't end up in dark places late at night. So things like that are being done as we go. The issue of cash on buses is one that always comes up, and that's something that we're working on closely with the operators, not necessarily looking to remove it right now, but wanting to make sure it's not visible. The other point I would make is that the agency have recently approached ourselves and operators looking to understand what role they might have in investments that improve driver safety, and we're working with the operators on that at this moment. So that's a national conversation that's occurring.
Yes.
So it's an issue that maybe the final comment is that we're monitoring the incidents in Waikato as opposed to other parts of the country, and every event is serious. At this stage, we are seeing events, but we're not seeing the level of escalation that other places are seeing.
Okay, thank you. And do you get, I mean, in terms of understanding perceptions of safety from the users, like we hear stories of parents kind of a bit unsure about their kids going to the transport centre and stuff. Do we have a kind of a bit of do the complaints that we receive or surveys, or you guys do they give a bit of a view of those perceptions?
They do, and there is a specific question about safety at the transport centre in that questionnaire. So that's part of our regular monitoring and feedback from customers. So we are monitoring those issues, yes.
Okay, and very final one. I noticed that some of our bus stops, so the Hamilton City Council infrastructure, it will have lights, but I don't see them working. And, you know, I've seen in certain locations later in the evening, there'll be people hanging out with supermarket trolleys and like filled with stuff. And like they don't look like passengers, they look like they'd have nowhere else to go, and they're kind of hanging at the bus shelter, so which would put people off using them. You know, and I'm just wondering, lighting, but they didn't look particularly well lit. I'm just wondering if we could also have a joint up conversation with the Hamilton City Council around bus stops that need better lighting to just make them feel more safe during those winter evenings and things.
We work really closely with your team, but I
Yeah.
think that's a great conversation for us to
Okay,
have.
I can raise it. Thank you.
Another question, Angela.
Thank you. Yeah, just to probably circle back to the zero emission buses. Yeah, thank you, Nigel and the team, for all the work that you have been doing. Yeah, I know since I've been here, it's been a live issue. So lots to do. Just what are the risks, if we miss our timings with the contracts coming up? So just to sort of follow on from Councillor Sarah's questions around the big contracts within Hamilton being renewed or extended. Are we managing those risks? How are we managing those risks?
So I might open, and Phil, please feel free to jump in at any time. So one of the work streams that was identified there for that bus contract renewal program is the ZEB technical roadmap.
Can you pull the microphone closer? Thanks, Nigel.
Yes, is
That's
that better?
thank you.
Okay, there we go. So one of the work streams that's come under that bus contract renewal work is the zero emission bus roadmap and the technical implementation plan. So both of which will be necessary to make sure that we have those, I guess, foundations in place to give us the best success for integrating ZEBs into those future contracts. As Phil had just mentioned before, there are a number of those units that are coming on at different times, and the whole combination of that work is making sure that we're in that position so that we can achieve it. Parts of that are included in sort of risk mitigation and risk identification, and how do we compensate for that? Phil, is there anything further that you might want to add to that?
Probably only that the topic of contract expiration dates is a live discussion, and we're meeting with the operators regularly to discuss it, and we have we're forming a good relationship with the agency's national public transport team to talk about that issue and the process that would be needed to go through to amend our procurement strategy, which is what would trigger an extension of some kind.
Cool, thank you. And just also thinking alongside the nationwide ticketing that's coming as well. So lining those things up with whatever new buses we get, the B card, current readers moving to nationwide ticketing.
So the national ticketing changes continue to evolve, and the timing moves frequently. There have been, that program is running to a different timeline that isn't yet fully established. I think we need to focus on our needs, and that will fit in at the right time.
And then just secondly was, Phil, you did mention wiper depots. I know we did have a few issues with structural things out there in Te Awamutu, Kihikihi. I'm just wondering, just making sure that we're using those learnings from our experience, as you've said, looking to the depots within Hamilton, because we're not just looking at possibly one depot. I imagine we're looking at several. So
yes, we've learned a lot through those projects, and the final round of remediation work is just about finished, which will see those projects complete. The investigations that were done 2 years ago and 4 years ago had certainly talked about the aspiration of multiple depots within Hamilton as a way of mitigating an electricity shortage or outage on one side of the river or the other, and that's certainly the basis of the work that we're now starting to do. Yes, that's probably the...
thank you for your work.
Eugene.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Nigel, for your report. I just note watching the news last night around safety, not so much passenger safety, but driver safety, that AT have doing a lot of work currently at the moment around driver safety, and mainly because they're struggling to be able to retain people and also attract new people to be drivers. And most of it's around safety. It's not about wages or anything like that, but it's around safety. And I think it was probably good that they went out, it was on the news, they went out publicly and really raised the issue. But yeah, they seem to be doing a lot of work in that area around driver safety for the fact of retaining drivers. So it's probably something to see what they're doing at the moment in that space. But good to see that we're doing work there as well.
Maxine.
Thank you. Just to support Sarah's point regarding the charging facilities, the RLTP expressly states that, that this would, the direction that would be taken there. And I guess we're really seeking to have that commitment, you know, into the future here through this committee as well.
Okay, no, thank you. Any comment, Phil, on that?
No, full support.
Okay. Any other questions or comments in terms of the director's report? Okay, there are not. We have a recommendation before us to receive that report. If I can have a mover and seconder for that, please. Okay, I've got Eugene, I've got Angela. There's nothing further. I'll put that. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. So we'll move to item 6.4. And this is on, commences on page 43 of our agenda, and it's the long-term plan, enhanced annual plan alignment in respect of transport. Okay, so welcome to Robert and Phil.
Greetings all. I'm gate crashing Phil's party today. I thought I'd come and talk to this paper. So this is our regular update paper on how we're going with provision for implementation of the Transport Program business case. It's got a companion paper that goes to the Future Proof Implementation Committee, which covers water as well, which is still in preparation, obviously. So I suppose I just wanted to say a few words of context, because we do find ourselves in the place where I think we're actually making progress to deliver the program business case. It's just not as fast as we would like. But we're also in a really uncertain funding environment in terms of still waiting to see how the NLTP lands, so what NZTA share comes in. So a lot of the projects that are identified here as green, we won't know if they are truly green until we understand what NZTA's input is, and we won't understand that until the NLTP comes out, which Jess will tell us is September-ish, I think. So at the moment, we've got what we've got in a tight funding environment. People are moving forward with best endeavours, and the underpinning planning work is continuing as we can do it. And you've got a workshop on that later on this afternoon that looks at some of those interim steps over the first 10 years. The other context I just want to remind us all about the program is the Transport Program business case is a 30-year vision for what we want this region to look like in 30 years. It doesn't all need to be delivered tomorrow. In fact, it assumed that it wouldn't all be delivered tomorrow, that we'd suddenly have BRT. What we're in the first 10 years is that slow build up and get us ready for when we have enough people and enough congestion and all the other drivers that make public transport attractive to make the shift to BRT. So my overall message is there's a few reds. We're trying hard. People are best doing what they can. Hopefully NZTA will match our funding for the local share projects. And in the meantime, we'll just keep beavering away.
Phil, anything you'd like to add? Okay. Hey, Maxine,
Oh, sorry, no.
Was that from the last time?
Yeah, sorry. I only comment is there's a lot of red on there and that's a bit depressing.
Okay. Okay. Other
Just
questions?
one.
Angela?
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for the report. It's really, I do appreciate the colour coding. It makes for easier reading, so thank you. My comment would be around, in the last 2 to 3 months, we've had announcements from the Minister around increases to public transport funding, which gets some people excited. However, when we do look down into the detail, a lot of those increases, I assume, have just been swallowed up with increasing costs and aren't what the spin tells us. So not sure if somebody could shed some light over whether, is there any truth in those statements, or what is the reality that we're actually seeing? And I'm assuming, as we've seen lots of red, that we need to read between the lines.
So a lot of, before Jess comments, because I'm going to hope that Jess is going to comment about the practicalities of those increases in public transport, which may not have really been real increases for this region anyway. A lot of the red I should reflect, in fairness to Waikato District and Waipa District. We do need to remember that they didn't do an LTP. They're in an enhanced annual plan process. So a lot of those programs that are highlighted there, they're just not in a position to make those investments, give us investments. So at the moment, given the state of their LTPs, but Jess.
So I didn't even have to put my mic on. Yeah, look, I think it's a mix of things. So obviously the NLTP, as we've already heard, isn't going to be out till September to see kind of where the infrastructure investment, but there has been an increase in overall operational funding, and it'll be for each regional council to work through how that's allocated. So it's a mix of kind of responding to cost increases and facilitating new services, but it's region specific, and I think exactly how we've distributed it here feels probably best to answer, but it's a mix is the answer.
Thank you. Other questions? Sarah?
Thank you, Chair. So, Jess, if you're able to answer, what is the likelihood of the service enhancements that Regional Council funded in its LTP getting co-funding?
So the continuous programs, the ongoing service funding has already been announced, and the Regional Council already has details of that. So the NLTP will be new allocations, particularly around capital projects, and that's what we'll find out about in September.
Right, okay, so from memory, the Regional Council's LTP included moving the comment to 10 minutes, and it had, or comment or Meteor to 10 minutes. And then it also had a new service, which maybe we talked about the Rototuna Rocket, but it was kind of a question mark, but it was a new frequent direct service. Were there some other, I recall there were some potential services for Peacock. Were there other ones? I'd have to pull it up. I'm just interested in exactly where all of those sit, because I mean, thank you for the report. I guess just the service enhancements weren't detailed in there in terms of what is funded and co-funded, and I imagine others from other districts might have other questions. I guess so. I'm asking about Hamilton specifically. Yeah. So
I can respond to that if you like. So the Regional Council's long-term plan included the local share funding for all of those.
Yeah.
We are waiting alongside everybody else for any sense of the government share on those service enhancements. The continuous program, which is the core of our existing services, we do have a level of funding certainty for within the context of top level numbers, which we are getting more confidence in as the weeks and months go by. But those new services are orange on this report intentionally because we don't have that clarity yet.
Okay, and so did I name them all, or were there other? I felt like there were additional ones.
You've pretty much nailed them. I think there's one in Rotakauri, Rototuna, 2 or 3 in Peacocks, the Meteor and the Comet.
Yeah, okay. A Meteor and Comet were both planned to go to 10-minute frequencies, were they?
Meteor to 10, Comet just to get more. I don't
More
recall
services.
exactly how many more.
Okay. And so, sorry, just back to that then, Jess, in terms of those additional services or service improvements around frequency, do we have an understanding of the likelihood of there being any money?
Look, I think at this point we'll need to wait. The NLTP isn't completed, and so we just don't have the answer to that until we get the release of the NLTP in September.
Okay. And for, I guess the other question there is then when the NLTP comes out, what will be the process for determining what happens with, say, the local share for the enhanced services, whether that's then applied to 100% fund a fewer number of improvements, or if it just isn't used? Where is that decision made?
So you had asked for that report to come to this committee.
Yeah.
We are not able to write that report yet. So we wanted to defer that to the next meeting, and we've noted that somewhere in here.
Okay, sorry.
So we'll come back to you in November once we have clarity on that.
So I'd already asked that question. Great, thank you. The holidays, it all went out the other end.
Do you have anything further, Sarah?
No.
Okay. Other questions?
If I may, I
Do you
have
know-
one.
Yeah.
On page 51, paragraph 21 talks about how vitally important it is for the implementation of all this work for partners to continue exploring financing options such as rating and value capture tools, high cost projects like the future bus rapid transit network. I was wondering when we might have that conversation, when you foresee that, Phil, or yourselves coming to us.
It's a bigger conversation than transport. So obviously we're, as FPIC, considering how we enter into a conversation with the government around regional deals, which is really where those tools become available to us. As yet, the government hasn't made any announcements on its framework for regional deals. So we're kind of in a waiting space, waiting for that, but starting to think about what we would into the deal and what that would look like. So in the context of public transport, the things that I would like to be thinking about for those areas that we want to apply a new funding framework to are how do we get services as well as infrastructure woven into what we fund, because you can't do that under the existing tools. Those kind of things are things we'd want to put on the table. In terms of the role of this committee, I hadn't thought that through, to be quite honest.
When that other stuff happens, it will probably become clear.
Yeah. Yeah.
I appreciate that. And I had a follow-up one, and that was around, because I really appreciate this report. We've been asking for alignment kind of report for a while, and it's great to see funded and part funded. I assume from that the exact years are good enough, since we didn't go into that detail of are things actually in the right year, especially for year 1 to 3, because you probably would have highlighted it if you saw something coming up. And as such, I suppose to keep that alignment, I'm just keen to explore further how, as the regional rating perhaps comes along for the other districts, how Hamilton situation where most of the buses are responds to keep making that alignment stick. So one of the things that comes to mind for me, and I've mentioned this to Phil before, is the business improvement review had a continuum of how we work together. And I guess I'm asking the question of, does everybody catch up to doing it the same way that we've been doing it with Hamilton? Or does Hamilton perhaps move down the continuum to the next step? And what does that look like? And where does that conversation happen? Yeah, so just wanted to raise it.
The second question is one for Phil, not for me.
Yeah.
The first question in terms of the report, in pulling this report together, we haven't gone down to the level of is it year 1 or year 3 of the LTP? We've just gone, is it in or is it out in the first 3 years?
You haven't heard anything that's made you think?
No, I haven't heard anything that's made me say, and the main, a lot of my attention is focused at the moment on the completion of the PT Pathways work. because that will really give us a lot more detail about what does the sequencing look like, both for services and hopefully for infrastructure to support the services as well. So
Great.
that work is really critical work for us. So the
So
workshop.
we'll probably look at that
afternoon will be fun.
November onwards once
Yeah.
we know what that looks like more. Thanks.
Bill, do you want to comment a bit more on that?
Yeah, if I may, we've obviously done a lot of work over the last 3 years, and that's going to be part of what we weren't quite just ready for this today. So maybe in November, when we've had a chance to review our freight work as well as our PT work, got the more of a clearer funding picture. And also basically just had a bit of time to get together as a transport working group, as well as getting guidance from individual partners, looking at the GPS priorities, trying to be smart about where we take our business cases, maybe look at that freight and productivity focus a little bit more. We can still achieve some really good outcomes. We just need to get a bit savvy and smart about it, and hopefully in November, we can take on board the stuff that, PC Pathways is going to be a great project that's going to give us some short-term guidance. And then we can start maybe having a bit more of a corridor focus, a bit more of a spatial focus that we can start talking about with a little bit more confidence in November. Obviously subject to lots of decisions, but yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Phil, second question.
Yeah, so we did talk about that at the May Future Proof PT Subcommittee. We attempted to organise a session for all of you and staff from your organisations to commence that conversation with what's called an investment logic mapping session. But because councils all had a break in July, we weren't able to organise that before the recess.
I appreciate that with long-term plans.
It's back on the table for us to organise now. So we'll shortly be sending something out about that.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Okay, no other questions or comments?
Like a debate, was that before or after? Better preferred before or after? Kind of comments, I guess. Because your whole thing is so different to our standing orders.
I understand that, Sarah. I have a much more relaxed style in terms of the nature of the type of how the committee goes about its work. So happy to take anything else that you may have.
Just the comments were, thank you again for these ongoing alignments reports. They're helpful to keep an overview of what is and isn't funded. My comments were, firstly, I was really pleasantly, I really welcomed the investment that Regional Council put into its LTP on enhanced services, and we've seen just fantastic results come from the Comet and the Meteor. We've got an 18% increase on last quarter for bus patronage in Hamilton. So things are the current approach is really working, and so I was really heartened to see funding for a whole new direct frequent service, and funding to improve the frequency of the Meteor, to improve the Comet service, and those would all make a massive difference to patronage in the city and people's experience of public transport. What I'm really worried about now is the funding from NZTA, because while the government has increased the overall pool of public transport funding, as Councillor Angela alluded to, in reality, a huge amount of that's just eaten up by inflation. And so in terms of real money, there hasn't been a very large increase. And so I'm concerned that those service enhancements are at real risk. And I guess it's to some extent a case of waiting and seeing, but yeah, it's really disappointing when there's so much great stuff coming from the councils in terms of pushing forward and making further improvements. And similarly, Hamilton City Council has some good investment in its own LTP around public transport to support those service enhancements and to keep making infrastructure improvements. But our finances are in a position where without that co-funding, we will not be in a position to fit within our debt capacity to go it alone and do those projects without the co-funding. So again, yeah, just really concerned that the amazing progress that has been made over the last few years could have the handbrakes put on because of this lack of, this huge uncertainty around funding. Yeah, but I guess it'll be something that we tackle once we have the answers.
I think we all look forward to September.
Yeah.
Well, at least there'll be some decisions,
Yeah.
one way or the other.
Cool.
Okay. And just for the sake of clarity, I'm more than happy in terms of when people to ask questions and make comments when they have the floor. So I don't make the distinction in terms of a sort of a two-stage meeting. When you have the floor, you're happy to, you're welcome to ask the questions and then make any relevant comments that you may wish to make. Yeah. And then you get this independent chair who has a different way of operating. Okay, anything else that people have? There don't appear to be any. So we have a recommendation to receive that alignment report. I'd just like to acknowledge and thank the team for putting that together. So thank you. Thanks, Angela. Seconded by Liz. There's nothing further. I'll put that. All those in favour? Against? Carried. So we'll now move to item 6.5 in terms of Te HUIA Independent Review Report and implementation plan. And it's timely that also Angus has joined us online. So Phil, you're going to introduce that, and I think we have James Llewellyn online in terms of presenting the report.
Yes, so really I was just going to introduce James and ask him to take us through anything that he wants to raise.
So welcome, James.
Thank you very much, and great to be here. Kia ora, everyone. So I will take the report as read, but what I would like to do is to focus on the staff recommendations, because there are quite a few in the report and they will spark quite a bit of discussion in terms of the way forward. So on page 53 of your agenda pack, the staff recommendations are set out there. The first one is the usual about the report being received, but the second recommendation has a number of sub-points that I would just like to briefly go through before we dive into questions and comments. So the first recommendation is that the Future Proof Public Transport Subcommittee support Te HUIA calling at Pukekohe Station. Once that reopens following the completion of the electrification project, there is an opportunity for Te HUIA to pick up passengers from that station even in advance of Auckland Transport Metro Station services commencing early in 2025. And so there is a potential then for Te HUIA to offer that service and charge a reasonable but a premium fare for those passengers to get the train to Pukekohe. So that's the first recommendation. The second is to support an amendment of Super Gold fares for Te HUIA to remove the peak hour concessions. So the first morning train from Hamilton on Mondays to Fridays and the last train from Auckland back in the evening. Currently, Super Gold passengers travel for free, and the independent review that's been undertaken and forms the basis of this report recommends that that concession be removed in order to increase fare box recovery, which has been mentioned several times is a key objective of the government. The third recommendation is to staff to monitor the impact of the recent fare increases, and depending on evidence about the impacts on both passenger numbers and overall fare revenue, consider reintroducing a family fare ticket or a 50% off-peak fare for children aged 5 to 15. So at the moment, we are monitoring the impacts of the fare changes on the passenger numbers. The first school holiday period happened very recently, and thus far there's no clear evidence that there has been a significant change in the number of children using the service as a result of those fare changes. But it is important to recognise that ideally you need between 9 and 12 months data from different holiday periods to come to more definitive conclusions about the impact of any fare change. So we do need, in an ideal world, to have more data from future holiday periods, certainly later in the year and possibly even the summer holiday period. The next recommendation is around supporting staff to commence work on other actions that are identified in my report and indeed the independent review as being desirable for the remainder of the startup period, that is until June 2026, and of course seeking input and approval from the subcommittee and council as required. And there are three that I would like to highlight from my report. There's the issue about the Kiwi Rail track user charge costs, which the independent review has highlighted the difference in methodology between Te HUIA and freight services in particular, and the differences in track user charges that result from that. There's quite a substantial number there, but it does need to be remembered that if those track user charges are reduced, then of course Kiwi Rail as a state-owned enterprise has to get its funding from somewhere else. So there is a discussion to be had, but we need to be mindful of how we work through that with Kiwi Rail as one of our key partners. Another item is looking at the safety case variation for the current push-pull arrangement. So the key issue identified from the independent review is that Te HUIA is currently limited to a 4-carriage arrangement under the push-pull system. And that means that it isn't possible to fully utilise the potential number of carriages we have, and therefore offer more seat capacity, and therefore potentially, reduce our unit cost to something like we have at the Capital Connection, which have much longer trains. So this is again another item that I think is certainly worth a discussion and maybe progressing further. And the last one I want to highlight is around cost contributions from Auckland. So in the independent review, it makes the point that under the new national ticketing system, it's likely that revenue between regions where services cross borders will be allocated on the basis of distance travelled. And if that was the case between the Auckland and Waikato, 38% of the distance travelled by Te HUIA is within the Auckland region. So again, there's certainly an interesting opportunity to look at future discussions around getting a financial contribution from the Auckland region. So those are three. We can talk about others as well as we need to. The last recommendation is an overarching one to endorse the Te HUIA improvement plan, which is one of your attachments, and that includes some of the longer term pieces of work that are required to effectively put us in a position where we can hopefully progress to a permanent service once the trial ends in June 2026. And again, I'll briefly pull out 3 of those. So they've already been mentioned in some respects by previous presentations, but we have the rolling stock detailed business case, which concludes that the current rolling stock has a limited lifespan and will need to be replaced around 2029, 2030. And so progression of that business case and identifying a pathway that gets that rolling stock procured, potentially as part of the Greater Wellington rolling stock order, is something we really do want to make progress with. Again, the stations in the North Waikato have also been mentioned previously. The independent review made it very clear that Te HUIA does suffer compared to Capital Connection because it doesn't stop at as many places as that other service and pick passengers up. And so more stops in the North Waikato would certainly provide more opportunities for people to travel and to pay a fare. So again, progressing that is a key priority within the improvement plan. And the last one, which is a much longer term one and is as much about spatial planning as trains, is around the whole issue of funding and financing through sources of revenue being identified by the new government. So land value capture around stations in particular, very keen to explore whether that's something that could be used to help fund future services for Te HUIA, whether that's infrastructure, whether that's rolling stock or whatever it might be. So something that we'd like to try and at least get a handle on and see to what extent other sources of funding other than the usual ones are going to be viable and potentially successful. So in terms of the report, that's pretty much all I want to say. So I'm now happy to open the floor up to questions and comments on any aspects of what I've said or anything that has been presented to you in the report. Thank you.
No, thanks, James. And certainly for members, the Te HUIA improvement plan starts on page 111 of the agenda. But I'll open it up for comments and questions. Eugene.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, there's a lot in this. Thanks, James, for the report. And I just want to, I don't know whether this would fit in full with 2D or E, but it's got support staff commencing work, etc., and then endorse the Te HUIA improvement plan. Is that also working with WDC and supporting a detailed business case for the northern stations?
Yes. Yeah, it is, because it's mentioned in the report and is one of the things that we should look to start as early as possible. Yep.
Okay, that's good. And just the other part of that was we talked earlier on about a possible low cost option for one of those northern stations. Is it looking at that, or is that part of a DBC?
I think it could actually be both. I think we'll need to work with the district in terms of your long-term plan process and how the detailed business case work might come about. But the idea of trying to do something earlier than that and at a lower cost is definitely of interest if there is a solution and that can safely be applied and delivered within the rail corridor. I think it's worth looking at.
Okay, that's fine. And just also acknowledge thanks for sending us information of, I know it's only early stages and this has all come to us early around a low cost option, but the processes going forward with that's been helpful. So thanks.
So I've got Angela, and then after Angela, I've got Andy online. Angela.
Thank you. Yeah, just like to support Councillor Eugene in his comments around, yeah, looking at all possible solutions for stations in the North Waikato. I think that's really vital, given what we've read in the agenda around stopping somewhere up there and picking up more people. Pukikawi, stopping there is a bit of a no-brainer. Auckland's not running their trains for some time, so it makes sense for us to test the waters up there and pick up as many people as possible. And just on that, yeah, just I do acknowledge that we have worked with Auckland right from the very get-go with Te HUIA, and appreciate Councillor Andy Baker's input as well. So I would also advocate for, we do stop within Auckland at Puanui, but at this stage we're unable to pick up Aucklanders either wanting to go into the Strand or maybe get off at elsewhere. So yeah, I would like us to open up that conversation around within the Auckland network, especially as we do move towards the nationwide ticketing options and all those backdoor capabilities that, you know, revenue sharing, making it easy for the actual customer to use both trains or all the trains. The customer doesn't mind who's running the service. They just want to get to go where they want to go. So if we could also open up the conversation within Auckland at Puanui and Papakura as well. Yeah, I would advocate for that one. Within the detail of D, James, you mentioned the track user charges. Would that be included within D, within that recommendation? Getting a nod?
Yes, it would. Yes, it would.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think negotiating with Kiwi Rail over those would be welcome news to our rate, our rate payers and our residents. And also, I imagine Horizons might want to join us within that negotiation as well. Sorry about that, Angus. I just had a question for Angus around a bit of a technical question around block of lines over summer. Yeah, we've just heard about the children's fares, giving it a bit more time to see what evidence there is, you know, whether we reintroduce slightly reduced fares for children. I'm just wondering what's our sort of timing looking like over summer, if you have that information yet, about how many weeks we'll be shut down for over summer?
Kia ora, Councillor. No, I don't have the exact block of line. It's not settled yet. We're still in discussion with Auckland Transport. To put it into context, City Rail Link is opening in a couple of years, and we have 2 major summer blocks of lines between now and the opening. We want to get that network as good as we can possibly get it before that link has opened up. So I'm signalling now we're likely to see a long block of line over both of the next couple of summers, as we have for the last couple of years, because we only have so much time to be able to do it. The long weekends, long summers, the alternative is prolonged shutdowns, which is just not really what people want to see. So we're expecting a long period, sorry. Just on the track access charge points, and first message is the obvious one. I'm quite happy to have that conversation with Waikato Regional Council. In fact, we already are. The track user charges, that they're a weight measure. It is just recovering the cost from the wear and tear from using. So I totally appreciate and understand the point about relief for ratepayers, but if those things are not in balance, it is actually just an impost onto taxpayers. So we just need to make sure that it's nicely balanced. Happy to have the conversation, quite happy to, and we will.
Excellent, thank you. Sorry, I just had a question around timing for some of these recommendations. When is it practically possible to see some of these things come into effect.
I can take that one, James, if you like.
Go for it.
We are, if you support it, potentially looking to introduce a stop at Pukekohe in late September. Super Gold changes could potentially be made at the same time. We have to go through a ticket change system update, and the Super Gold changes could be made in the same pack. The one thing I would say on Super Gold is that that's a recommendation from this committee that would need to be approved by council. So that won't happen until our council meeting at the end of August at the earliest. The question around the timing of changes to child fares, as James has said, I believe we need enough time to know what the level of impact has been. Anecdotally, there has been some impact, but from the data, we haven't seen it yet. I would like there to be at least several more months of data. I don't know that we could make a change before the next school holidays, but maybe we could do it in the new year. But that would be probably a minimum. The others, I think, are primarily a conversation between ourselves and Kiwi Rail.
Yeah, thank you. Just on that child one, I suppose these most recent school holidays, some people might have got a bit of a shock once they were on the train and almost couldn't get off once the conductor came round. That is something that I'd like us to closely monitor. And also just listening to feedback, I suppose, on socials about maybe those people who are choosing not to travel because there is now a no child fare or no family pass as well. I know the family pass did prove to be quite popular. If you've got more than one child, the costs will add up, and I think that it may put some families off taking the train and just driving up instead, which would be a shame, really. My notes gone. And obviously we've heard for public forum about, Frankton bus services, so I'd be keen for us to do that one as well. I'll leave some space for someone else.
Just through
Andy.
the chair.
Oh, sorry. Was that you, James?
Yeah, sorry, just through the chair. One thing that we are looking at through a current piece of work for optimization of the Hamilton bus network is whether we can divert one of the existing services that passes relatively close to Frankton, but doesn't actually stop there at the moment, into the station at the appropriate times to connect with trains. So although I can't guarantee we can do it, we're certainly looking at it. So it's just something to be aware of. Thank you.
No, thank you. Andy.
Morning, everyone. So just, I guess, just following on from Angela's thing, and I agree in regards to Puanui, and I think that'd be a better stop because it opens up the airport. But I'm not sure about Papakura. Just in regards to the funding. The request, I guess, for sharing. I know that has been, we talked about it at the last Auckland Transport Board meeting. It's been raised, so I know that there are conversations happening in behind the scenes in regards to that. And just my last point is, if you are going to be using Puki in the interim, I don't know who would do it from the regional council, but it would pay to talk to the Puki Business Association. Because I think there's an opportunity there for Puki to become a little bit of a destination thing as well, both ways. So be good to have that chat. As I say, the funding thing is certainly being discussed behind the scenes, and so we'll have to wait and see. But I think January 19th, I believe, is the first EMU into Pukekohe for the start of the electrified service into Puke next year, I believe, but it's certainly January 25. And there's an opening little ceremony coming up on the 13th of August where the Minister will be there dancing happily around saying, look at this. So good work, but thank you. All good.
Thanks, Andy. Sarah.
Oh, thank you. My first question was just around the super gold card recommendation, and sorry if this is like really obvious, but can I just understand exactly what we're regarding as peak and off-peak, and what would then a trip to Auckland and back look like if you're still wanting to use a concession for a super gold user?
So through the chair, the two services that are currently classified as peak services are the trip from Frankton to Auckland, which starts at Frankton at 6:05, and in the opposite direction, the trip that leaves the Strand at 5:35. So those are the two services we would classify as peak.
Okay, so say, just looking at this, on Monday to Wednesday, if you're wanting to use a concession, you'd need to leave at 2:05, but then there'd be no return trip you could use with the concession. But on a Thursday to Friday, you could leave at 9:30 and come back 3:20. So you'd possibly expect then only having most of your super gold card holders would be travelling Thursdays to Fridays or the weekend. Is that?
If that's what they choose to do, yeah, that would be what they would do.
And what's the current behaviour from the card holders? Do they, I mean, is there low usage in those mornings anyway? And
in overall terms, the proportion of super gold passengers for all the services is about 24%, which we've established from various surveys. I don't have the details of the split between the services, but my strong suspicion is that the very early service is less likely to have people who are super gold users on it, but there may be some. The services, as you say, on the Thursdays and Fridays in particular, which are more frequent and offer greater choice, are the ones that I suspect are the most popular. And what it does illustrate, of course, is that frequency is the best possible means of actually getting more people to use public transport, because it provides more options and greater choice, which is what we all aspire to do.
Thank you. And how can we fully understand the potential impact of these fee changes if we don't know which services the card holders are currently largely using? I'm just, I guess, what could there be a real downturn in usage that actually has a detrimental impact on service targets?
I think there's potential for there to be some impact, but we have heard multiple times from super gold card holders that they be prepared to pay something, and it may not be on every trip, but they are prepared to pay something.
Thank you. So I have some more questions. I'm just pulling them back up. And Angus, I had a question for you, which was, and just to understand you call it the track, like the blocks, or when it's off, when we can't use the tracks due to maintenance. And it sounds like during summer there'll be a large period, and people often raise, why can't the train run on public holiday? And I understand your constraints there, but what's the long-term solution? Because if we want passenger rail to be successful and viable in the long run, we need it to be regular and to serve all those times. So what is the long run solution?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I totally understand the frustration, and we do hear it all the time, and for good reason. People would like to catch a train, and they don't want to have to deal with the frustration of it not being there. Totally understand. I guess the long run solution is we actually have to do the short term piece, and that is fixing the state of the network and getting it ready and supporting the upgrades that are in place. There is major investment from the last government before that, and the current government in Auckland around electrifying that network, as has happened, extending it down to Pukekohe, and building third and fourth main lines, and building the City Rail Link, and all of these pieces are really major. And it's there for a reason, which is to increase the frequency of Auckland services and in order to support Te HUIA to run. And I know you all know that, but I just always think it's important to reiterate the context. It's an operational network. We don't have the benefit of having one that we look after and do work on, and one that gets used at a separate time. So we have to balance all of these two pieces. And demand is lowest over summer because people aren't at work, they're at the beach or at the lake. So we have to make use of those. We've had long blocks of line the last couple of years. We will be having them again for the next couple. The exact dates are still being worked through between us and Auckland Transport, but they'll be announced as soon as we can. What's the long-term piece? We would love to get to a place where our long weekends are not major maintenance week windows, but they are also the best opportunities that we've got. We would also love to see blocks of line over summer and over Christmas and New Year being just a few weeks as opposed to being many, many weeks. That is going to happen when we get past this particular hump, which is getting Auckland ready for City Rail Link. We're a few years away from it, but it won't be permanent.
Okay, thank you. And Angus, thanks for that. The other question was, I just wanted to try and understand this difference in track user charges. You talked a bit about needing to pay for the wear and tear of the track, but then in our report here it highlights that there's a difference between your metro and freight, and then how Te HUIA is being charged. Can you help shed some light on that, please?
I don't know that I don't have the detail on it, I'm sorry to tell you. I'm curious about it as well. I think the way it was explained to me is that this is based on the freight rates that we're using, and so it's the same. And so I am interested in working out why that is. I don't have an answer for you.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Okay, well, we'll get to the bottom of it eventually. Thank you so much for that. I've got a question around the children's discounts, and Councillor Strange raised that just before, but how are we going to, I'm just keen to understand, Phil, how further time will give us more evidence. Are we essentially looking to see, is there a drop in usage of families, for example, taking the train now that the government subsidies are gone?
So the context here is that this was a conversation that happened prior to HUIA launching, and the decision was made that there needed to be some kind of a discount for children. We've had many years of nationally mandated fare structures which have changed the system that we previously had in place for the region. And we reintroduced that historic system across the region on July the 1st. In terms of fare capping. The only thing we didn't reintroduce was a family fare for Te HUIA. I just think that after 3 or 4 weeks, it's too early to say that there has been an impact. We will survey and we can get a sense of that as quickly as possible. But for now, the data isn't telling us that there has been a drop at this point.
Okay, and I mean, I guess logically speaking, if you're looking at comparing taking the train up versus the car, the more people that you have, the more expensive it's going to be to take the train versus the car. And so what would be the downside in just saying, let's reintroduce the family fares now?
We could look to do that. We could look to do that. But I guess it wasn't done for the July the 1st changes, and there would, that would be the only thing.
Okay, thank you. And I was, in terms of some of those key recommendations, it seemed like reviewing the safety case to allow more carriages was a key, I guess, came out as a priority from, and just interested in what do we think the likelihood would be of being able to do that? Are there any barriers we know of? And yeah.
So there was a significant amount of work done by KiwiRail alongside the rail regulator to look at the change to a push-pull system from a pull-pull, which is a locomotive on each end. That was a process that took place over months. Within that, there was a decision made that limit on the number of carriages would be imposed. I wasn't party to that, so I don't know the detail behind it. I know that the performance, the question is around the braking performance of the carriages and then the braking performance of the locomotive and how the two interact with each other when the locomotive is on one end and then when it's on the other end. So there were a whole series of brake tests done and a whole load of performance assessment work completed. I think that is where the conversation starts, really. What led from that testing to the decisions that were made, and I think that's the conversation that we would open up back with KiwiRail and the rail regulator.
Yeah.
We're not the decision maker. It's the challenge, and KiwiRail isn't either.
Okay, Chair, I'd like to foreshadow a few amendments to the motion. I wonder if it's worth.
Can we come back to that in a moment? What I'm proposing to do is to dispense with morning tea and that we go through and we do stop at 12 because we do need to have the lunch break before we get into the workshop. We have 3 more items to go, so that's the operating environment we have for the next 50 odd minutes. But we'll come back in terms of any recommendation, any changes or additions to the recommendations once I've taken all the other questions or comments. Mayor Adrian.
Yeah, I thought I'd say something for a change. From an outsider looking in, obviously not directly impacted by or the service availability at My Way, this is a hugely complex piece of work, and just really acknowledge the staff time that's gone into trying to figure this out, because it's like an octopus with multiple tentacles going in different directions, and sustainability is still going to be our critical breaking point, along with the risks and the showstoppers along the way, because we're not there yet. Absolutely support the gold card people contributing, because if they're not paying the freeloaders, that's not adding to the sustainability. Yes, it's a person on a seat, but it doesn't contribute any sustainability to that service. And yes, we can look at the benefits from a wider perspective of them either coming down from Auckland to Hamilton for the day or vice versa, but it's the sustainability of the service that we need. The family fare is an interesting one, because if there's 2 adults travelling, well, if there wasn't a family fare, then it is a cost inhibitor, and at least there'd be 2 adults on the train paying if they had kids with them. So there's an economic, there's a cost, a revenue stream there that should be reflected upon. I really liked what Angus said about the work that's got to happen on lines. We live in a world now where people expect things to happen 365 days of the year and not be inconvenienced by roadworks, not be inconvenienced by scheduled electricity outages, in order to ensure that we have a sustained supply for 365 days of the year. So there's times when man needs to be a little bit more realistic of their expectations, and certainly support Angus and their thoughts around trying to get the work done in the quietest periods, because it won't happen every year, but we're not there yet. So yeah, just acknowledge that work. You know, we have to be realistic, but our greatest risk is what's ahead of us. There could be some showstoppers still come up in our faces that, yeah, but we're on the journey, and I know a lot of people would love to see it continue. So, but it's got to be sustainable. Thank you.
Thank you. Jennifer.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm following on from Adrian there around the sustainability. I would really suggest that the items, I'm sure you're thinking of this yourself, the items that would change the fare box recovery, or say that track charge that really needs to be dealt with ASAP, to give everyone clarity, to do that ASAP. And what I mean by that is, I mean, we all want to have this be the most financially sustainable, and also to have the money left over in the budget in order to bring on a Sunday service or something like that, which is a service improvement that's being so called for. The sooner we do these things, the more money we have to do that. So even if there is a council meeting that needs to be had, maybe it is worth a conversation with the CE and the chair on when that decision needs to be made in order to hit a deadline, say in September, rather than waiting for a meeting. So yeah, just pushing on timing. On the gold card issue, I really support a contribution. What I do always try for, though, is to try and make things simple. And so the off-peak, on-peak difference, I find difficult, but what has been recommended here probably makes the most sense for the situation we find ourselves in. Can I just double check with the gold card? Is the off-peak, which at fare, fully covered by gold card? Is that the 20-something dollars fully coming to regional council from gold card when a person over 65 B card?
Sarah, can you just turn off your mic for a moment?
Yes.
And so, because I had thought previously about 50% fare would be good, but obviously then it would simply be coming from 65-plus-year-olds rather than from the gold card system. So that doesn't work. I don't imagine there are that many over 65s who are using the 6 a.m. train and the getting home at 7 or 8 p.m. train. But seeing those numbers, as was talked about before, will be really important, I believe, when it comes to regional council to make that decision. My colleagues will want to see the drilled down data on how many people we're talking about when there's subsidies coming from regional council, or not if we remove them. And then the other point was, if there's a decision to be made around a family fare or child fare, I would always go towards a child fare rather than packaging in a family. Families are of all sorts of sizes, and it gets, I find, more complicated than it needs to be if you're just counting the people you're taking and the age. And I support that 50% for a child fare piece at this point. Then the last point was the discussion with Auckland City Council about contributing towards this, obviously an ongoing item. I would suggest it would be really good to have a bit of work done, if it hasn't been done already, on the experience of Aucklanders coming to Hamilton and what they are able to do there. What are the main attractions in Hamilton or nearby, even Raglan, and which of our connecting services can they use to get to those attractions? Because Aucklanders aren't going to come here with carless if they can't get around carless. and it speaks to that point that was made in the public forum. You know, number one on their list was around the bus connections, which obviously helps people in Hamilton anyway, but really sells the case to Auckland City Council, hopefully, that there's a real benefit to Aucklanders in coming here. So I wanted to make those points. Do we have anything like that already that we've done, Phil? Looking at what an Aucklander's experience coming here with connecting buses?
We are currently working on what we're calling the customer experience roadmap, which is includes a whole series of detailed discussions with public transport users. And there's a workshop on that, I believe, just after the Regional Transport Committee meeting in November, or after this meeting in November.
Great.
So that's where the results of that will come through to you.
So when we go back to Auckland Council to ask again, it'd be great to demonstrate that. Thank you. As part of the changing business case. Thank you.
Okay. So I've got Maxine. Are there any other questions after Maxine? Okay, no, that's fine. Over to you,
Right, I
Maxine.
don't want to stop anyone in getting through the agenda in time for a lunch and a break. I did have a quick question just with regard to Pukekohe passengers and the fare that they would pay. My expectation is that it wouldn't be the same as perhaps an AT fare. We are offering a higher level of service, I guess. But in order to be able to pick them up, we would want to make it attractive. And also that there be a seat available for them. I guess we aren't always chock-a-block, but I guess when there's opportunities to be able to pick people up, you want to be able to give them the full package.
Good questions. Based on the Waikato public transport zones, it would be a 4-zone trip, which I believe is around $6. If you were to use the Auckland fare zone structure, it's 5 of their zones, which is about $7.50. My suggestion would be that you'd look to set a fare closer to $10, so you reflect that premium experience and the Wi-Fi and the cafe and the things on board. And it's a direct service as well, which isn't something that Auckland passengers would get on their current or their future system, which would go all stops.
And then should the opportunity arise to be able to pick up passengers, Papakura and Puanui, it would be based on a similar kind of philosophy?
The thinking, yes, would be that you'd have a division of that $10, you know, $6, $3 or whatever it might be to cover those intermediate stops. So yes.
And just remind me why it is that we don't pick up in Papakura and Puanui?
The service, even though a lot of the planning work was done, all of the planning work was done with Auckland Council, the decision was made that it was a Waikato funded service, and on that basis it was for Waikato passengers. So the service was set up to drop off at those stops, pick up.
And does the ridership reflect that original ideology?
That's been the basis of the conversations with Auckland Transport about the role that the service has within their region. Yeah, it's a discussion that hasn't stopped since that day.
I would support Councillor Angela's earlier comments then about further conversations with Auckland Transport around flexibility in that. Certainly in terms of a passenger experience, the train is at the station and they aren't to know whether or not it's one that they can get on, and in fact simply assume it's available to them. And so I guess having some flexibility to be able to do that, you know, would be valuable. So further conversations with AT, especially if we're going to be picking up passengers in Pukekohe, which is already on their network. And just in terms of that, Auckland Transport will begin their service early January. What might be the longevity of use of that station?
aspirationally as long as possible, based on the discussion at the Auckland Timetable Committee. It is at this point for the duration of that gap. It would not necessarily be for a long time, but the aim would be for it to be successful and to show a value, and that slot on the network is used with Te HUIA train, whether there are people from Pukekohe on it or not. So how do we build on that success is the vision that we have.
And then how, last question, I guess, really, how much are we relying on the ability to add additional carriages to be able to support a higher ridership, or that we might expect a higher ridership?
There are certainly reports increasingly frequently that all seats on Te HUIA are taken and there are people standing for portions of the trip. So as the service is growing month by month, there is less capacity. So those are longer trains, which we have run through school holidays really right from the start of the service, becoming more important for more of the services through the week and the month and the quarter of each year.
Thank you. Well, can it be on the record that I support that additional work as well? Thank you.
Sorry, I just relied on.
Right.
Sorry. It's just following on from the family fares and trying to understand how we landed a family fare, what a family fare is, and what do other train services do for a family fare, because I guess ultimately you want to have a consistency in that you get on this train, that's what you can expect. It's a bit like road speeds around the roads that you know, when you're in the town, you travel slower, you know, just for consistency. So was there any data around that? Like it probably has been.
Looks like
We're probably ready to move on to recommendations. I know.
Angela's poised to respond.
Yeah, and anecdotally, yeah, there was just a thought that if we wanted to attract families onto the train, everyone paying the full fare, in essence, it, you know, it's 100% cheaper. Well, not 100%, I won't say that. You know, it was more affordable for families if we reduced the price. However, I'm happy to support 50% childcare. You know, families look different for everyone. Yeah. I don't think there's no other interregional service really that caters to families. So it was a first.
Good to understand.
Yeah.
I am indeed. So if you can put those up, thanks, Jordan. I've got them in front of me, but for the rest of the
Chair Bill,
yes.
We do have a few changes.
Yes, I wanted to get these up first. Perfect. And then
I'll leave you to chair.
I will. So those are the recommendations that are recommended in your report on page 53. Do I take it, Angela and Sarah, have you talked in terms of suggested amendments? Okay. So who's going to propose those? Looks like someone was pointing at you. Okay.
Yeah. Is it worth having a biology break or?
Okay. Okay, we'll break for 2 or 3 minutes for those who need to a quick pit stop. So we are adjourned for 3 minutes. Oh, well. It's all going to be a question and comment.